everyone, and welcome. My name is Daniela from Asian Studies Student Council, and today I'm very excited to introduce you to our Professor Mateja Kovacic from our Asian Studies major at Yonsei University. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And to start off, can you briefly introduce yourself and your field of study?
My name is Mateja Kovacic, and I'm Associate Professor in Asian Studies at the Underwood International College at Yonsei University. And my areas of specialty are intersections between science, technology, and popular culture, with a focus on Japan within the broader context of East Asia and transnational context. So basically, I'm trying to figure out the ways that technology and science shape culture through material artifacts and through ideas, but also the ways that popular culture shapes and sublimates science and technology.
What initially drew you to Asian studies as a field?
It was popular culture, not just popular culture, but I majored in cultural anthropology and philosophy. And as part of those majors, I got to explore many different cultures and many different aspects of culture, society, politics, economics, and so on. And I found something interesting in studying Japan, such as, for example, I started not with popular culture. Actually, I just realized that. I started with theater and literature and religion and spirituality. And then eventually I started looking at anime and manga as a way to better understand Japanese culture, not as a reader, but in a critical analysis. So I really can't single out any one moment that I thought that was it. I'm gonna do Japanese studies. It was rather that after a while, I realized I was already doing Japanese studies because something just drew me to understand more and better, which only later I would be finding out what those were. And so maybe for students especially, it would be good to know that sometimes we are driven by our interests and very often cannot explain what those interests are. But then in hindsight, it starts to make sense. So it's okay to be drawn to something first out of interest, and then to figure out or allow yourself to figure out later what exactly drew you intellectually to that thing. And that's how the story went with me. The intellectual aspect of my engagement, the intellectual understanding came only later.
Perfect. And how has your understanding of Asian studies changed ever since you've entered the field?
Uh, in a sense, it hasn't changed much. It hasn't changed because I always had a very broad understanding, because I was coming from pretty broad fields of philosophy, anthropology, and later on history. And so I have always been focused on the interconnectivities between Asian societies and cultures and languages. And in that sense, my approach and my understanding through interconnectedness, through the ways that some events in history, such as modernity, so-called modernity, or techno-scientific modernity, influenced non-Western societies. So there were some similarities, and I understood that from the beginning. So I guess what changed is really the depth and the nuances of my understanding, having been able to do a deeper study and deeper research by actually living and being in places in East Asia. And these then accumulated into knowledge. So I guess not so much the understanding per se, but the complexity and depth of the knowledge, and what arose from that is appreciation, huge appreciation for my areas of study, which, I started with, like any undergrad student starts with maybe passion, maybe interest. but then I ended up with huge respect and loving intellectually the subjects that I do. And one thing that actually changed within the field itself is that I could see the ways that the field of Asian studies was growing and has been changing and transforming through different economic, political, and cultural factors and forces, and to what extent, compared with 15 years ago, there is so much more publication and scholarship and PhD students and undergraduate students who want to engage with aspects of East Asia. So it went from a very niched field to a much, much bigger field, a growing field. Also, the subjects changed as well. Yes, I think the world has been changing, and I've been then trying to accommodate that.
Perfect, thank you. And just as you've mentioned in your introduction, your research explores science, technology, and popular culture, right? So then how do these areas help us understand contemporary Asia, Asian culture, and society?
Well, there are different dimensions to science, technology, and popular culture. And so historical understanding is very important, how certain scientific ideas formed over time, what they were shaped by, for example, and then similar with technology and culture, what were the interconnections, what were the big events, moments, or not necessarily big, but significant in the ways that have shaped science, technology, and culture into where we are today. So it helps us, and because science, technology, and culture and popular culture are always a part of, as well as an outcome of, everything else happening in the world, in the society, on a small scale, large scale, we can use them as a lens, as entry points into many different areas. We can better understand, for example, the economic and political aspects of a society. We can better understand the values, the social values at different times. But also we can learn lessons from it. For example, what led to the abuse of certain technologies, or what led to integrating some scientific discourses into governance, and so justifying certain questionable politics. So these three aspects of our life are a good source of information that allow us to better understand the society as a whole, because so many different aspects of our life could intersect in them. But at the same time, we can understand that technology, science, especially these two, they're not things in a vacuum. They're not abstract things. They're very, very much shaped by norms and values and many different factors and actors and forces in the society. So it's a mutual process of understanding society better, Asian societies better, Asian cultures better, but also understanding how and what we do in terms of technology, science, and culture.
Perfect. When it comes to understanding Asia and everything that you just mentioned, are there any common stereotypes or dominant narratives surrounding Asia that you feel like need to be challenged?
This is something that I do a lot. Something that I do a lot, and especially in my courses on science, technology, and popular culture, and science of symbiosis. Somebody who is doing technology and science, there is a preconception, for example, that modern science and modern technologies are associated very much with the Euro-American cultural context, and that modernity, techno-scientific modernity, occurred in non-Western societies, including in Asia, only after it encountered knowledge and artifacts from Europe or from the US. And so in my work, research as well as teaching, I show students, say grassroots, but local forms of science and technology and knowledge in general, and how they have formed locally, how they have interacted with what we consider to be global or universal, which are ultimately pretty West-centric. And so definitely there is a moment where I want the students to be very critical about the idea of universal or global technology and science, and to notice the ways that locally knowledge is produced, things are produced, culture is lived. Always, of course, in a process of interaction between cultures, because culture does not care about national borders. It doesn't end or begin at the national borders. And that's why I also encourage in my work to see cultures as, in transnational terms, something that transcends the notion of the geopolitical notion of a nation.
Okay, so you're Croatian, you're a scholar of Asian studies. So then what responsibilities do scholars have, in representing cultures and histories that are not their own?
Oh, this is a good one. Well, so the question is, when I'm talking about Asian cultures as a non-Asian, right? Could there be any risks or issues with that? Do you feel competent to talk about your own culture as an expert?
This I don't think so. I don't feel like I'm a good representative because there's so much more that you need to know, right? And you're constantly learning. So depends.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Well, this goes to the question of emikinetic perspectives, right? Perspective of an outsider and perspective from an insider. On the one hand, the question is also, can we competently, as experts, talk about the cultures that we are born into if we haven't studied them, if we haven't specialized in them? So on a personal level, if somebody asks me about Croatia, even though I haven't lived in Croatia for 15 years, so I'm not defining myself in terms of being Croatian. But if somebody asked me to talk about Croatian culture, I could only share my personal opinions and worldviews because I never studied Croatian culture. I was born within it, into it, but I never studied it. I mean, to an extent I did. As an anthropologist, we had a lot of courses on Croatia, but I never specialized in. So I wouldn't even feel confident to talk about it in an academic or more professional setting. However, I have dedicated myself to research of East Asia and Japan in particular. And so I have years of research field work, as in living living in Asia, working with people in Asia, just everyday life, but at the same time conducting research in terms of interviewing people on the subject that I research. For example, if it's AI or humanoid robots, how do I gain knowledge of that? I interview engineers, I interview people who interact in some ways with humanoid robots and AI. And so I definitely feel more competent and to talk about Asian cultures than about any other culture, because I have spent many years of studying, not only through my own work, but studying other people's works, accumulating knowledge. And so I wouldn't say that it's a form of, when I talk about Asian cultures, that I'm representing any view, that I'm representing culture. I'm very, very conscious that our knowledge is limited and always situated. Our knowledge is always defined by not only our nationality or ethnicity, it's defined also by our gender, by our past experiences, by all the interactions that we had thus far, by all the memories we carry. And so there is no way that we can be entirely objective, or that we can provide an ideally clear and pure narrative of a culture. And so I'm always and self-reflective and critical in terms of understanding the limitations of my knowledge, and also understanding that, and this is probably very important and something that I had to learn myself when I was still an undergraduate student, that culture is constantly changing. You cannot take a culture into a laboratory and dissect it and then point to different parts of culture and define it and say, this is it, and then retest it and over again. And then produce quantifiable data that allows you to say, yeah, 100%, this is it. Culture is a living, breathing thing that constantly transforms and shifts. And even as we are looking at research on, for example, otome games, you can ask 10 different people how they feel about it. So otome games in Asia, and you can find 10 people who are of Asian origin and ask them about otome games, and they will offer you 10 different responses. I mean, there could be some similarities, but there are always differences. So it's important to acknowledge the heterogeneity, the diversity, the cultural diversity and heterogeneity of any single culture. And so I bring my knowledge together in my own teaching and research that is based on interacting, on studying, on really gaining in-depth knowledge to provide some answers, to provide some perspectives, and not seeing my own perspective as truths or the ultimate truths or the definitions. I always say that a discussion starts with a definition, right? Not ends with a definition, because we have so many different perspectives, so many different voices. And so I do feel confident. I do feel confident within Asian studies, not because of the belief that I am a big expert or that I know everything, but based on knowing how much work went into accumulation of knowledge, testing my hypothesis, but also continuously interacting with the scholars, with the people, with the ordinary life as much as the academic discourses, and then providing the best possible perspective at any given time.
Thank you so much. That was a really, really nice answer. And lastly, what advice would you give to someone who would be interested in pursuing or is already pursuing a degree in Asian studies?
A good place to start with is that to ask yourself, what do you expect from yourself as an Asian studies scholar? And I don't say Asian studies student, because to be a student is already to walk on the path of scholarship. And you're constantly engaging scholarship, and you're engaging Asia through scholarship. You're no longer engaging Asia through everyday, only through everyday life or through media or through popular culture. You are now engaging Asia through academic knowledge, through numerous studies that have been done by others, by your teachers. And so you already are on the path of becoming a scholar of Asian studies and of Asia. So the good question to start with is, what do I expect from myself as a scholar of Asia, as a scholar of East Asia? And then another advice that I always like to give students is knowledge is something that grows with us and we grow with it. It's something that we don't fully control, and that is a good thing. It's good to allow yourself to be drawn to different subjects and areas and to try and see how you feel about learning something. And I call this an intellectual itch. You're very familiar with that. An intellectual itch, which means that you're reading about something and not every topic interests you the same. And not every topic makes you feel energized in the same way, or makes you happy and joyful or curious in the same way. So it's good to explore different areas of Asian studies. One wonderful thing about Asian studies is that it's not defined by a discipline. It's defined by a geographical area. It's area studies. But what does that mean, that it's not defined by disciplines? That means that you can try out maybe economics, maybe politics, maybe sociology, maybe anthropology, maybe philosophy, maybe history, maybe literature. You have so many different entry points, and that allows you to really explore fully different aspects of a culture. And as you are doing that, you will encounter that, or you will become more and more aware that some things make you happier than others. Some knowledge, some discipline, some theoretical perspectives, some cultural phenomena and artifacts make you happier and more joyful and more interested than others. That's what I call the intellectual itch. And my advice then would be to follow it, to follow your itch and to allow yourself to be taken by that itch into the area of study that you feel good with, that you feel passion for. Knowledge is not only a cognitive, we usually associate knowledge with the brain, with the mind, right? But it's also a matter of feeling and emotion and passion as well. And so I would advise students to first start with that question of what do I expect from myself? And then second, to allow yourself to explore and react to your intellectual itches, react to your own curiosities, and let it take you to different areas. At the end of the day, you will find a pattern of interests. And then you will, so basically, instead of trying to define it, control it, and decide it, let yourself be exploratory. Let it take you and lead you in taking different courses, encountering different people and knowledges.
Come to you eventually.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today, and thank you so much for all the information that you provided, all the advice, and all your perspectives. It was really interesting. Thank you so much, Professor.
Oh, thank you so much. It was wonderful to talk with you.